Hey everyone, welcome to Joydala Fashion Guide. In today's video, I'm going to be explaining how to calculate an 8-piece skirt, or what we also call a panel skirt. So I'm going to be explaining how you can fold your fabric and how you can calculate your seam allowances and all. After which, I'm going to be using this to make an 8-piece skirt. It's an African print. I'll be using the board for my illustration and calculation. So let's go to the board. So an 8-piece skirt is also known as a panel skirt, and it's because it has 8 parts, 4 in front and 4 at the back. So that is why it is an 8-piece skirt. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is how much fabric do you need for an 8-piece skirt. Now, the amount of fabric you need depends on the volume of the skirt and how you want your skirt. So you can use between 2 yards to 3 yards of fabric. So it depends on how full you want your skirt to be, and then the size of each panel, because they are going to flare at this down part. So how much flare do you want? That is by the time you cut it out like this. How much flare do you want? So that is what will determine the amount of fabric that you need. So if, for example, you want yours to be 10 inches wide, 10 inches, this is how wide the flare will be for 10 inches. The down parts get to be as wide as this. Okay, and then if you want to make all of them the same wideness, it means 10 multiply 10 by 8, you're going to have 80 inches. And if you divide that by 36, because a yard is 36, you are going to have 2 yards plus 8 inches, because you have 36. 2 yards is 36 plus 36. That will give us 72. Plus 8, and that will give us 80. So that means if you want yours to be 10 inches wide, if you want each panel to be 10 inches wide, then you need 2 yards plus 8 inches. And then if you want yours to be, let's say, 12 inches wide, 12 times 8 is going to give us 96. And by the time you divide 96 by 36, 36 because it's a yard, so it depends on the yardage that yours is coming. There are some that comes by 35. So check the length. This is what I mean, the yardage. So when you measure, some come by 35 while some are 36. So it depends on yours. So this is 36. 36. So that is what I'm dividing by 36. So if I divide 96 by 36, I'm going to have 2 yards plus 24 inches. So I need 2 yards plus 24 inches. So it depends on how full that you want it to be. Okay, if for example I'm making the wideness to be 14, just multiply 14 by 8. If you multiply 14 by 8, you're going to have 112. and if you divide that by 36, if you divide that by 36, you are going to have 3 yards plus 4 inches. So that is how to know the amount of fabric to put on fold. So if, for example, you plan to use 2.5 yards, what you are going to do is simply this. If you plan to use 2.5 yards, just find out the yardage. After that, you calculate it. 2.5, that will be 36 plus 36 plus 18. 12 plus 8, that is 20. Carry 2. 6, 7, 8, 9. That will be 90. That will be 90. Then the next thing you want to do is to divide 90 by 8. And that is how you are going to share each panel. Okay, now the 8-piece skirt, there are different ways of making it, or different types of 8-piece skirt. There are some that this mid part will be, if you look at this diagram and this diagram, they are not the same. There are some that this mid part will be smaller than the sides, while there are some that it will appear as though all are the same. Now, how do you achieve that? And then again, I want to say that if you are making an 8-piece skirt, if it is a skirt that is going to have an elastic, then you are going to use the hip measurement. This is hip. You will use the hip measurement for the waist as well, if it's going to have an elastic. But if it is not going to have an elastic, then you use the waist measurement. So if you want to calculate, you divide the waist by 8. You also divide hip by 8 to know how you are going to share it. So if, for example, the hip you are working with is 40, assuming hip is 40, we divide the hip by 8, we now have 5. It means that each of the panel is going to be 5 inches wide. 5, 5, 5, 5. Okay, and you know, in a skirt we usually have the front and then the back. So 40 divided by 2 will be 20. So if this represents the front, that means you have 5, 10, 15, 20. And if this represents the back, you also have 5, 10, 15, 20. So for the one that you want them to be equal, it means that you are going to share. For the hip area, you are going to make it 5, 5, 5 all through. 5, 5, 5. But for the one that the middle is smaller than the side, what you're going to do is to use your bust span measurement to determine the middle, and then the excess will go to the side. Or you simply subtract 1 from this middle and add it to the side. That means it will be 6, 4, 4, 6. That way the sides will be wider than the middle. But if you want yours all to appear the same, then that means you are going to use 5, 5, 5, 5 all through. We got this 5, 5, 5 from, we are assuming that the hip is 40. So that is one way to determine how much you are going to, how you are going to allocate your measurement. So if you are going to be using a rope or an elastic, you simply use what you have on this hip, you use it for the waist. That means you are also going to use 5, 5, 5, 5. But if you are not going to use a rope, or you are not using an elastic band, then you have to make use of the waist measurement. So assuming in this case the waist is let's say 34, let's say 32. In that case, you divide 32 by 8, and that will give you 4 inches. Okay, that means for the waist area, you are going to have 4, 4, 4, 4. While the hip you have 5, 5, 5, 5. Okay, and then to know how to get the curvy parts at the knee line, this is the knee line. You can just simply use the one you have on the waist for the knee. Okay, that means you use 4, 4, 4, 4, or you subtract 1.5 inches from the hip. Okay, because this is going to be on fold. Okay, I remember you also need seam allowance to join this, so preferably you can just make use of the 4, 4, 4, 4, and then when you are doing your final shaping at the end, you can now shape it the way that you want it. So another thing that we need to know is, because sometimes some persons cut the 8-piece and they have shortages after joining it. Now we have already known that, okay, this is hip 40, this hip is 40, and if you divide 40 by 8, you have 5, 5, so each panel is 5, 5, 5, 5. But what about the allowances? So let's see how to calculate the allowances, because if you do not get the allowances at the end of the day, after joining all the panels, you will discover that you will have shortages. So you need to know what to add to what you already have here, so that you do not have such shortages. So to explain that, I'm going to be drawing this separately. So assuming this is the side, so after cutting out the skirt, you are going to have something like this. So this will be the side. We are going to have 2 center and 2 side. Okay, you have side, center, center, side. Okay, and that is how the front and the back is going to be. The back will also have side, center, center, then side. And then for the one for the back, you simply use here as a zipper allowance. So how do you now know the seam to add? So for the first explanation, we said we are cutting all the seam. So assuming we are making here 5, 5, 5, 5. So let's add our seam. This side seam, we need side seam. Okay, and this side seam depends on if you are going to be turning with a lining or you just want to sew the side like that. So you need between 1 or 1.5 inches for this side seam. So side seam, you need 1 inch or 1.5. You need 1 inch or 1.5. 1 inch or 1.5 for the side, and then you need 1/2 inch to join this side to this first center. Okay, to join you need 1/2 inch. Okay, and then you need for this center you need 1/2 inch to join it to this, you need 1/2 inch. So assuming this is the back panel, you need zipper allowance as well as an allowance to join these two together. Okay, so you need 1.5 inch. The 1 inch will be the zipper allowance. The 1 inch is the zipper allowance, while the 1/2 inch is the seam allowance that you are going to use to join these two together. So the same with this, you also need 1.5. 1 inch for the zipper because you will join them together at the middle, and then you need a 1/2 inch. So let's say 1.5 inch for the zipper and the seam. Okay, so you can use 1.5, or you can also as well use 1 inch. If you don't want this place to be too bulky, you can use 1 inch. Okay, 1 or 1.5. Okay, so that is for that. Therefore, this one you need to join it to this, so you need 1/2 inch. And for this last side, you need 1/2 inch to join it to this. And then the side seam, you need 1 inch or 1.5, which is 1.5. Okay, so to now check the total inches that this particular one needs or require, if you are using 1 inch for the side, 1 plus 1/2, because 1 inch is the side and 1/2 is to join to this. Okay, so let me label it so that 1, 2, 3, 4 for clarity's sake. So you need 1/2 inch to join 1 to 2. You need 1/2 inch to join 2 to 1, and also to join 2 to 3. Know that they are panning. Okay, so you need 1/2 to join 2 to 1. Then for the back piece, because it is a panel skirt, you need, and there is a zipper, you need 1 or 1.5 to use to join these two together, because one time you join these two together, it is the middle you are going to have the zip. So if you use 1/2 inch, it may be too small for the zip, so you can use 1 inch or you use 1.5. And then this third panel or piece, you need 1/2 inch to join it to number 4, and this number 4 you need 1/2 inch to join it to 3, and then you need the side seam. So the total allowances that you now need for this number 1, you now need 1.5. So instead of 5, you add 1.5 to that. Instead of folding 5, you add 1.5 to that, and that will be 6.5 inches. For number 2, you are using 1/2 here. Let's say you are using 1/2 here, you are using 1.5 here. That is 2 inches. So it means that this plus 2, this will be 7 inches. Okay, and then number 3 is just like number 2 plus 2, which also be 7 inches. And then for number 4 is just like number 1 plus 1.5. That means if you are using 1 inch as your side allowance, but if you are using 2 inches, you add 2. Okay, and that will give you 7. That will give you 7 inches, 6.5 inches or 7 inches. So if you are using 1.5 plus 5 will give you 6.5. If you are using 2, it will give you 7. Okay, the same thing with this panel. If you decide to use 1.5 and 1/2, that will be 2. Okay, so at the end of the day, to fold this, you can simply use That is, you can mark at 7 inches. Remember that you are going to determine your wideness of the fabric. When we are cutting, you're going to see that. So assuming you have already decided and you decided to fold, let's say 12 inches. Let's say you decide to fold 12 inches. If this is your fabric, unfold 12 divided by 2 will give us 12 divided by 2 will give us 6. So let me just mark this to get to 6. So assuming this is our fabric, unfold, this is 6, unfold, if you open it, it will give us 12. So this is waist. You determine the hip, okay, from your measurement. Your hip can be 8 or 9 depending on the customer. So assuming the hip is around here, hip. Then also remember that you also need the knee. So let's assume that this is the knee area, okay, and then let's assume that this is now the hem of the skirt. So this 7, because the fabric is unfold, this 7 you divide it by 2, and that will give 3.5. So you mark 3.5 on the waist. If you are using an elastic, you also repeat the same 3.5 on the hip, okay. And then for the knee, you subtract 1 from the 3.5, so you can use 2.5. So that when you are now connecting, you connect this to this, and then this to this, and then from here just take it straight to this corner. Just take it straight to the corner like this, okay. So that is how to mark that is how to mark it on the fabric. So because all of them, they are just 7, 7, 7, 7. Once you cut out this one, after cutting it out, you will use this to cut 3 more, because all of them are the same. So you are going to have 4 of this. I'm going to have 4 of this, okay. So let's go to the second type of panel skirt. With all this same, just have what we have just done, have it in mind. So assuming the kind of skirt you want the middle to be smaller than the sides. We have said that you simply reduce the middle by 1 inch and add what you are removing to the side. So if we are still working with a hip of 40, and we said 40, after dividing by 8, we are going to have 5 inches. So we simply say subtract 1 from 5, here becomes 4, 4, and here becomes 6, 6. So if, for example, this is the front panel, we already know that this side 1 is going to be 6 inches wide around the hip area. Side 2 is going to be 4 inches wide. Side 3 is going to be 4 inches wide. Side 4 is going to be, center is going to be 4 inches wide. Center is going to be 4, and the side is going to be 6. So the same thing, how do you now determine the total you are going to cut? So just like we did before, you put in mind the same allowances that you are going to have. So I'm simply going to change this number. Instead of 5 here, we are going to now have 6. Instead of 5 here, we are going to have 4. Instead of 5 here, we are going to have 4. And instead of 5 here, we are going to have 6. So by the time you now add the allowance to it, so assuming the allowance you are working with side 1 inch and here half, this 1.5. If you now add 6 to 1.5, you are going to have 7.5. 7.5 inches wide. And then for the middle, half inch here, and then half inch here, and then 1.5. That is 2. 2 plus 4, that will give us 6 inches. And remember that these two are the same, so here will also be 6 inches, while here will be 7 inches, 7.5 inches. So at the base, at this base here, they can be the same, or you can also decide that you don't want them to be the same. If they are going to be the same, it means that the total fabric you are folding, if you are going to be folding from our explanation, assuming you are using 12 inches wide, you can try to use 12, 12, 12, 12 if you want all to be the same. So assuming that is what we have, unfold, that will be 6 inches. Unfold 6 inches. And then for when you want to now cut, the side will be the same, but the two center, but the side will be different from the center. Okay, so if for example you now cut the first side, this is 7.5. when it is open, unfold, that will be 3 3/4. So you mark that on the waist, you mark that on the hip. Then for the knee, you go in by 1 inch. So you have something like this. So this is the side. So once you have cut out this side, you now use this to cut the second side. You now use it to cut the second side. So after you are through with that, you now pick another fabric and fold it again. You pick another one, the same wideness, 12 inches. But this time around, we are not using 7.5, we are now using 6. And 6 unfold, that will give us 3 inches. So from here to here, you mark 3 inches. On the hip, you also mark 3 inches. Here is waist, here is hip, here is knee. And then for the knee, depending on how curvy you want your knee to be, you can subtract 1 inch. So it comes like this, and then like this. So after cutting this center, you use this to cut the second center. So in that case, the two center will be the same and the two sides will also be the same, but the 4 of them will not be the same. Okay, so it's different from in this case where after cutting 1, you use 1 to cut 3. For this, you cut the side you cut one side. After cutting this side, you use that one you have cut, you use it to cut the second one, and then you fold another one again, cut the middle. After cutting the first middle, use that to cut the second middle. So that is how we can add allowances to our 8-piece skirt. Now another thing I want to explain, there's something else that I want to explain. So far I hope it is clear, and I hope that you understand. So if you have any question, you can ask your question in the comment section below, and I will answer the question. So don't forget, if your skirt is going to use an elastic or rope, you use same measurement for waist and hip. But if it's not going to have elastic or rope, then that is for the waist. You also use hip measurement to be hip. But if it is a band, then you use your waist divided by 8, then the hip divided by 8, so they'll be different. I hope that is clear. Now the next thing I want to explain is that for an 8-piece skirt, the back is usually different from the front because of our bum. So if you decide to cut all the panels the same, you will discover that the back piece may be a bit tight, okay, and while the front will be free. So in order not to have any issue at the back because of the butts, you can create an allowance for that. Just like when you are making a pant, you add extra 2 inches allowance to the back piece. So if this is the front, and this is the back, and the back has I'm just trying to differentiate it. There is a big bum, so that's expand it. So to accommodate this bum, and there's no bum in front, remember we are working, let's say the hip is 40, and we have said that this 40 we should divide it by 8, and each panel will be 5. Now this 40, first of all, you are going to divide it by 2 to have front panel and back panel. So 40 divided by 2, you have 20 inches. Now because of the bum, we are not going to make it 20. Instead, we'll subtract 2 inches from the front and add 2 inches to the back. So we'll subtract 2 from the front and add 2 to the back. In that case, the front is going to be 18 inches wide, while the back will be 22 inches wide. So you see that the back will be wider than the front because of the hip area, because of the bum. Okay, so if you now have it like this, how do you now cut your fabric? So all the explanation we have done before, just have that in mind. and then you can now simply, if you want all the panels to be the same, you can now simply divide this by 4 and just share it. Or if you don't want them to be the same, like the way I explained before, you just reduce the middle and increase the side. Okay, so if for example we want to share this 18 into 4, 18 into 4 for this front piece, assuming this is the front and this is the back, the easiest way to do it, remember that you are subtracting 2 inches. Subtracting 2 inches is like removing half from each of them. Remember that before they were 5 5, which gave us 20. So if you just simply remove half, that means this will be 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 5, 10, 50, 20. Sorry, half, 1 and a half, 2, that is -2. And then for the back, instead of having 5, 5, 5, 5, remember that we are adding 2 inches, and it's like adding the half. The half you are subtracting from here, from each of them, you are adding it to each of these. So this becomes 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5 and a half. Okay, so this is what you should have in mind before you now add your same allowance, the same allowance that we explained before, that one that I explained earlier on when I drew this. Remember I said for this side you need same allowance, side same allowance. Let's say side allowance of 1 inch, and we need to join this to this, we need ½ inch. We need to join, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. We need to join number 2 to number 1, we need ½ inch. We need to join 2 to 3, we need ½ inch. To join 3 to 2, we need ½ inch. To join 3 to 4, we need ½ inch. To join 4 to 3, we need ½ inch. And then we need the side seam of 1 inch. So the total allowance that we need for number 1, we need 1.5. Number 2, we need 1 inch. 3, we need 1 inch. 4, we need 1.5. So this is the same allowance you are going to add to this to be able to mark it out correctly. Okay, plus 1.5 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1.5. So at the end of the day, for this front piece, you are going to have, if you add this together, 5, you are going to have 6 inches here. If you add this, you are going to have 5.5, 5.5, 6 inches. Okay, so that is what you are going to have here. But for the back piece, using the same explanation, plus 1.5 plus, for the back we have zip allowance. Remember, there is zip allowance. Okay, so instead of half here, plus 1 again. So instead of half, plus 1. So we are going to have 1.5 for this, for the middle. The reason why you are having 1.5 is that you are going to use half to join 2 to 1, and then 1 inch to join 2 to 3, and there will be zip at the center. We need 1.5 here because this, you are going to join 3 to 2, and there will be zip at the middle, and then you need half to join 3 to 4. So that is why this will be 1.5, 1.5. Then number 4, you need half to join 4 to 3, and then you need 1 inch for same allowance. So at the end of the day, you are having 1.5 all through. You are having 1.5 all through. So by the time you add 1.5 to this, 5 plus 1, 6, 7. So this is going to give you 7 inches. So you're going to have 7 inches. So if you want to fold your fabric, you can cut the first one, then use it to cut all of them since all they are the same calculation, and then do your shaping after you have joined all the panels together. Before you now after joining all the panels together, then you can now create your shape. I hope that is clear. Now another thing, one last thing I want to explain before we call it a day is that if you do not want the front, the middle to be smaller than the side, the way that we did from the beginning, you subtract 1 from here and add it to the side. Okay, so that the final one, this will be 4.5, while the side will be 7 inches, 7 inches. In that case, the middle will be smaller. It will appear smaller or narrower than the side. You now have that fine shape of the skirt in front. This front is small while the sides are wide. Okay, and then you can now leave the back. You can leave the back like this. Okay, so that is just what I want to explain for the front part. If you want a smaller part, then also for the back, if you decide that you want this middle to appear smaller than the back, you do the same thing. Okay, you simply subtract 1 from here and add the 1 to here, so here becomes 6. That means you use 6 inches for the middle, and use 8 inches for the side. So it depends on how you want your skirt to be. I hope we are clear with all this explanation. You can go through the video again so that you understand very well what we have explained. To just make a final recap, I said we are making the 8-piece skirt. We are dividing by 8 because the skirt is in 8 parts. And normally to fold your fabric, we use the widest circumference of the body, which is in this case is the hip. So that is why we are dividing the hip by 8. And then I've also explained how to know how much fabric to put on fold. It depends on the amount of fabric that you have. If you are using 2.5 yards, simply divide the total yardage that you have by 8, and that will give you an idea of how wide each panel should be at this down part. Then after knowing how wide the panel should be at the down part, to know what to mark inside, that is when all this division is coming in. If your hip is 40, first of all divide 40 by 2, because we have front and then we have back. So that means 20 for the front, 20 for the back. And we have gone to establish that the front should be narrower than the back because the back has a butt. So if you want your skirt to have a fine shape, subtract 2 from the hip of the front and add 2 to the back. So if you are working with a hip of 4 or 40, it means that the front panel will be 18 inches wide, while the back will be 22 inches wide. So by the time you add the 2, you have 40. Okay, and we are going to explain each panel. If you divide 20 by 4 or by 8, if you divide 40 by 8, each panel is 5 inches, and that was how we came across this 5. And when you put 5, and before you start taking your measurements, unfold, the 5 will become 2.5. Okay, it's 2.5. So after you have marked your 2.5, you need to add seam allowance. Okay, so you said by the time you have put your fabric on fold, the fabric is already on fold. So if I'm working with this, and this is the waistline, this is the hip line, this is the knee line, this is the hip, the knee, and then this is the waist. On the hip line, we said because the 5 unfold, that will be 2.5. You mark 2.5, and then you need to add seam to it. So the seam allowance is what I've explained so far. So from all our explanation, you can see that the seam allowance always falls around 1.5. So after measuring 2.5, you now add 1.5. And remember that we are working on fold, so 1.5 on fold, that will give us 0.75. So to be on the safe side, after marking what you have, you just add 1/2 inch or 0.75 or 1 inch. You add it to that. You repeat. If your skirt is going to have an elastic or a rope, you repeat the hip measurement for the waist so that they will be the same. And then for the knee, now see for here now I have 3.5. You say you simply subtract 1 inch to bring out the curviness, and then you mark the knee. Then from the knee you take it straight down to the side. So I hope this is clear. So I have come to the end of this class. I hope the explanation is clear, and I hope now you now know how to fold your fabric when making an APC skirt, and you now know how to add the allowances, and of course you now understand why you are adding the allowances you are adding. Okay, so just take your time and watch the video again, and I'm sure that you will understand better when you do that. So until next time when I come your way again, I remain G Joy. Don't forget to like this video, share this video, and please subscribe to this channel if you are yet to subscribe. And for you who is a returning subscriber, I want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you for supporting Jodella Fashion Guide. Bye for now.